All right, so this is a North American P-51C Mustang. So the C model Mustang was the second version of the Mustang. The P-51A was the first version, and it had an Allison engine, which lacked a two-stage supercharger, so it wasn't effective above about 15,000 feet. We sold the P-51As to Europe, to England, and they installed the Rolls-Royce Merlin in the P-51, which had a two-stage, two-speed supercharger, and that gave the airplane the altitude capability that it needed to be an effective bomber escort. And so that was the genesis of the P-51B and C. The B model and the C model are the same airplane, except the Bs were built in Inglewood, California, and the Cs were built in Dallas, Texas. So this is a Dallas airplane built in 1942. The obvious difference between an A and a B or a C is that the air intake scoop on the Bs, Cs, and Ds are below the propeller, and in a P-51A, the air intake scoop for the carburetor would be above the propeller. Another difference between the A's and B's and C's and the D model is in the wing root. They redesigned the gear mechanism in the D model, and they increased the size of this fillet right here to come to about here. So there's just a little bit more wing area in this a little bit more wing area right here at the wing root. I don't really think it changes the way the airplane flies, but it may contribute slightly to the fact that this airplane has less drag and is a little bit faster than the D model. There are two things that really made the P-51 different, and one is the water-cooled engine, and the other is the laminar flow wing. So if you look at this wing, it has the shape that might remind you of something, and that is a tuna. And so if you're trying to solve a complicated engineering problem, always look to nature. A normal airplane, the thickest part or chord camber of the wing would be at about 30%. In laminar flow airplanes like the Mustang, the thickest part of the wing is back here at about 50%. That means the air stays attached to the wing longer. It makes the wing create less drag and makes it more efficient. The most obvious difference between an A, B, or C airplane and a D model Mustang is the canopy. The A's, B's, and C's were a fastback or a razorback, and the pilots sat lower and there was less drag. In the D model, they raised the pilot seat up, they redesigned the instrument paddle to provide better visibility, and they placed a bubble canopy so you could see all the way around the airplane, better visibility for the enemy. The cockpit is laid out incredibly well, and everything is where you would want it to be, and your hand just falls to it. The trim console is right here. Your hand rests here when you're in flight. Power, it's close. As you're changing power in the airplane, you change trim, and so your hand can quickly move between the throttle and the trim console. The flaps are way back here at the back of the trim console. They're well separated from the gear handle, so there's no confusion to prevent accidentally retracting the gear on the ground, which would be disastrous. The cockpit just fits. This airplane becomes part of you when you fly it. It's incredibly responsive. If it has a drawback, and that is as you get going very fast, the ailerons become very heavy, real heavy in pitch, or in roll. But the pitch forces are always just what you'd expect and what you'd want. Again, the airplane is just a part of you. You wear it. The other thing that made the Mustang more efficient was it's a water-cooled airplane. So if you look forward at the engine, you can see it's very narrow. The airframe is basically the width of the pilot's shoulders, and you could never fit a round engine, a radial engine, inside of a fuselage that small. But the V12 will fit in that area because it has water cooling. So right in this area right here is a big radiator, and that radiator provides cooling for the engine, and so the air comes in the scoop on the belly, goes through the oil cooler down here and the radiator here, and is heated, and then this door is regulated to nozzle that hot air, expanding air down, and recover that as thrust. And they attribute about 15 horsepower in heat recovery to thrust because of this. It's called the Meredith effect. Because of the the two significant differences that made the Mustang so much more efficient and gave it the range it needed to go all the way to Berlin with the bombers. And that was a turning point in the war. Another difference between the B's and A's, B's, and C's in the D model Mustang is that the tail control surfaces are fabric covered. This is for two reasons. Number one, because aluminum was a strategic material, and number two, because fabric is lighter, and they knew that lighter control surfaces were less prone to flutter. They figured all that out in the D model, and they had enough aluminum, and they made them more robust by making them out of aluminum. As you can see, the engine's got 6 exhaust stacks on each side. They're very short, and they make a very distinctive staccato sound when the airplane's flying or just idling on the ground. It has that unique Merlin sound, which is so distinctive. Another difference between the P-51 A's, B's, and C's versus the D model is the A's and B's had 2 guns on each side for a total of 4, and the D models had 6. The A's, B's, and C's were a little bit prone to jamming because the guns were mounted on a little bit of an angle. And there's a lot of people will tell you that the A's, B's, and C's have a different wing platform than the D to compensate for mounting the guns vertically, but that's not true. What they did was move the stringers inside the wings, which gave them more room inside the wing so they could mount the guns vertically, which reduced jamming. The Mustang has an 11-foot Hamilton standard hydromatic propeller. It's a marvelous machine. It was, in multi-engine airplanes, it was the first feathering propeller, which allowed multi-engine airplanes to come home after they lost an engine. Obviously, it doesn't feather on the Mustang, but it's a big propeller, and when you add power, it takes a big bite, and you can feel it in the airplane.